So I thought I'd dress up today for what is probably one of the most insane books I have ever read. Now I want to thank Carlos and Yolanda for inviting me to read this thing. It's a Pop 1280 by Jim Thompson. It was published in 1964. This is another one of those, holy crap, all the best books were written in the 60s. This is a crime novel, but this is so much more. This is definitely a great American novel. Let me give a brief synopsis of this story. So it's set in the fictional town of Pottsville during the early 20th century. The novel follows Nick Corey, a seemingly dim-witted sheriff whose pleasant exterior hides a scheming, psychopathic personality. One of the most fascinating things about this book is that Nick is constantly manipulating people and stuff, but he's also the unreliable narrator. So there are a ton of times in this book where you're like, wait, he's gaslighting me. It's just so interesting to read a story where this psychopath is manipulating the people around him, but also through the narrative device, he's manipulating the reader. It's just so fascinating. The reason I dressed up is because this takes place in rural Texas in what I assume is 1917. He never gives an exact date, but there aren't a lot of cars. And at one point, someone makes an offhanded comment about whether or not the communists are going to overthrow the czar. So it's probably around 1917. But it's weird because they don't talk about World War I at all other than that. So I think that's just like an offhanded thing to kind of place you there. But you would have assumed at some point in the story he would have talked about veterans or people being sent off to war or something. But maybe not, because the book is just about him and how self-centered he is. So he probably has no concern for something like that because he's the only peace officer in the county. So it's not like he get drafted. This book is incredible. It does such an amazing job of creating like the atmosphere of rural Texas in the early 20th century. And some of the people in this book, like, they are disgusting, they are awful, and they are terrible, and they are based on real people. I've got family that grew up in West Texas, and some of these awful characters in this book remind me of stories that I was told by my family members that are older than me that grew up out there. This book is something else, man. Throughout the book, he does all sorts of like gaslighting and manipulation and just these really awful things that only a sociopath would do. And what's really interesting is that Thompson does such a good job of creating a very believable sociopath. I mean, this is from 1964, and all the characteristics of Nick remind me of the traits you see in a book called The Sociopath Next Door. And it was published in 2005. And it's just like a breakdown of how sociopaths act and what they do and their self-destructive tendencies. Like, most of them burn out in their mid-30s. And like, you can kind of see that happening in the book. All these schemes he's doing, they're kind of getting all twisted and tied together and stuff. And it's just really, really fascinating because he's like a dirty cop. And he's barely even a cop. Like, he's a politician more than anything. And you can tell that Thompson really knew what he was doing, writing these characters and writing this location. I mean, he grew up in Oklahoma. He was born there before Oklahoma was a state. It mentions that in the intro to the newest printing of Pop 1280. This is just a wild book. Like, I don't want to go into details because this descent into darkness in this book is just astounding. It's a super, super short book. I really think pretty much anyone would enjoy this. Like, it is a crime novel, but man, it transcends the genre in ways I did not expect. I mean, there are parts in it that are absolutely hilarious. Characters will mess with each other, and there's just these witticisms or these funny situations, and then it immediately flips into like these horrific situations. It's just so magnificently written. It's one of those books that I am probably never going to stop thinking about. I'm gonna have to read it again at some point. This book is definitely in the running for my favorite book of the year. And I cannot believe that this book is 60 years old. It's just incredible. But yeah, Pop 1280 is something else. I mean, all of you need to go read it. The audiobook is really, really good. I'm going to look up the exact one because there's two, and one of them is doo-doo. If you get one, get the one read by John McClane. Not that John McClane, another John McClane. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm trying to get back into reviewing a lot more books. Let me know in the comments if you've read Pop 1280. If you've got any other disturbing crime novels along these lines to recommend, I'd love to hear about them, especially if they take place in rural Texas over 100 years ago. I want to thank you for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.